All right. Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining our webinar series. Again, we've been going through this wonderful discussion around AI tools and resources and how this can help in the teaching and learning practice. And today we're going to focus on student engagement. And so David's going to walk us through a presentation here, but we also want to hear from you. So at any point you have any questions, feel free to either raise your hand, put it into the chat room, just let us know. And then at the very end, we just want to spend a little bit of time, just a few minutes to see if there's any questions since our days in Nashville, which was such a wonderful learning opportunity, and see if there's any questions or thoughts or anything that anyone has at that point too. So I am going to stop chatting because we want to hear from David because he's been putting this great work together and I'm really excited about it. So David, I'm turning it over to you.
All right. Thank you. It's nice to see everybody. For those of you who I saw recently in Nashville, it's a pleasure to see you again. For those of you who were not with us, we certainly hope to see you at some point in the near future. If not, we hope that this will be a good extension of and reflection of work that can be done there at Tennessee State. Where we had such a wonderful time. But as Kelly mentioned, today we're going to talk a little bit, we're going to kind of shift ourselves back to what we actually do for a living. Okay. We've been immersed for the last, however long individually the journey has been, but over the last at least week, I know that we've been immersed in tools and technology and remembering different websites and trying to get in and experimenting with different chat bots and developing different agents and photos and just really working through the technology and developing a foundational understanding of how it can be applied in some interesting ways to our work, right? Some of the things that we've talked about over the course of this webinar series, efficiency, lesson planning, unit planning, really using the tools effectively to improve our ability to not only develop tools and resources more efficiently, but also to be able to develop them in a way that is more equitable and collaborative and becomes an open education resource for our colleagues, whether it be in our buildings or in our districts or in our regions or states or whatever territory we're working within. And so that work has been incredible, but it's important for us. I heard something really amazing down at Nashville. I heard a lot of amazing things, and some of you did too. And I don't know if this caught your ear, but Dr. Robbie Melton, the provost of Tennessee State University, shared with us lots of interesting tidbits. But one thing she said that struck me, many things she said struck me, but this in particular as it relates to where we're going tonight. She said that, yes, we have artificial intelligence and we are immersed in that world and we are working through that. But just like with AC, we must have a DC. With AI, we must have a BI, a biological intelligence. And she talked about biological intelligence being in demand in order to work with the artificial intelligence tools that are at hand. And I just made that poem up without AI, but nonetheless, the idea that we have to continue to develop our biological intelligence around these tools, right? And think about what we in our game of education, right, where this can be applied beyond just the, I know we're all in the same space, but I still think that the things that we're using AI for are relatively superficial, right? I think that they've deepened our approach and made, like I said, made us more efficient, allowed us to do things more collaboratively, et cetera. But are we really using this tool to meet the students where they are with these tools themselves in the classroom? And then further to develop their use of those tools beyond just downloading TikTok videos or using those TikTok videos to create AI TikTok videos and so forth and so on, and really using those tools to muster around the curricula that we provide as educational professionals, right? So with that, I'm gonna share my screen. The first, I'm gonna introduce just to so we can remember our joy with the AI. One of the tools that I learned how to use was this one.
classrooms, we often see two types of student engagement: compliant and active. Compliant students may follow instructions, but active students, they dive deep, questioning, exploring, and connecting ideas across disciplines. It's our responsibility to design tasks that ignite this active engagement. Imagine asking students to solve real-world problems, tasks that require them to think critically, collaborate, and innovate. When we challenge them to analyze data, debate perspectives, or create solutions, we're not just teaching content, we're fostering a mindset. Let's move beyond rote memorization and compliance. Let's cultivate curiosity and resilience. By promoting critical thinking across multiple domains, we empower our students to become problem solvers, ready to tackle the complexities of the world. This is how we transform education into a journey of discovery and growth.
So nothing new there, right? In that theory, but we need to get back to that. We need to get back to that stuff. We need to get back to understanding how we can engage students with what we ask them to do. What we ask them to do and what they do with that and what they use to accomplish what we've asked them to do is the more complex usage of AI that I'm talking about, right? It's not just using AI to, generate something for us, to create that task, but then turning around and using the AI or the tools that we've learned how to use to manage that task, to complement my biological intelligence that I need to apply to solve that problem within that task, et cetera. But as teachers, right, and administrators who work with teachers in making sure that that connection is being made in the classroom, right, we have to get back to understanding the difference between the types of engagement that we seek and where they kind of live in the world of, hold on, I'm going to share my screen again. I'm going to, okay, can you see my screen, everybody? It's good, beautiful. Okay, so we're going to talk about compliant engagement, which is wonderful when we can get it, sometimes in certain schools and certain places, right? I remember my first couple years.
David, not to interrupt, but did you tell him that that video was done by AI?
No, I thought it was, how many people thought that video was a real sort of just created, real video that somebody made?
I knew it was AI.
How did you know it was AI?
Easy. The pacing, the camera, the face, many aspects. Like from a biological intelligence point of view, I could tell it wasn't human.
Right. Right. But it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool that I could
Absolutely.
Right. Imagine if I needed to, there's lots of uses you could make videos for that. You just have that, sending your message. And that basically was a summary of what this presentation and this work that we're doing is, right? Just done by AI in a matter of moments. Now we need to flesh a lot of that stuff out here together, right? Which means that it can't just do our jobs for us, right? But it can sort of sell that concept, which was kind of the point. But so thank you, Kelly, for reminding me to reflect on that video, which was created by AI, because I know we're going to be talking a lot about classroom and observation stuff today and work in the schools today. So I wanted to get us to taste that AI piece again. But again, compliant engagement versus active engagement in the classroom and how we can break the mold and move forward on the matrix of Bloom's taxonomy and understand cognitive rigor and how we can use that to determine what we're asking kids to do. If it's going to be complex enough for them to use these tools to solve the problems that we want, right? So we know we're going to talk about engagement. We're going to talk about the tools. And that's basically the extent of our agenda today. And I, like Kelly said, want to open it up to conversation, thoughts, ideas, bridging the gap between AI and BI. And so understanding engagement boils down to understanding the definitions of these kinds of engagement. And so compliant engagement is something we see when we know that there's passive participation calling on students who are sitting there receiving the information, waiting to be called on, where since students follow the instructions one by one, complete the tasks at hand, limited interactions. There are interactions, but they're limited, the think, the pair, the share, right? It results in minimal interaction with the material, reducing the overall effectiveness of learning, which ultimately has a negative impact on the critical thinking, right? Because if they're not engaging or interacting in a maximum way, then they're not critically thinking. They may be thinking, they may be answering, but they're not necessarily solving and progressing through a series of problems to get to a bigger understanding, right? And compliant engagement ultimately can hinder the development of those skills. These are all things that we know, right? We know that active engagement is where students are participating, they're collaborating. We're asking them to do things that foster critical thinking. We looked at this, right? Does everybody remember, if you weren't on a couple webinars back, we talked about in the age of AI, there's ways that we can supplement the distinctive human skills that we need to climb this hierarchy, the Bloom's taxonomy, right? We know that in the beginning of any unit of study, we need kids to remember and recall certain things that they're going to need to solve problems going forward or to answer questions about texts going forward. We need them to be able to understand certain new words, new terms in context, new laws, rules, etc. We need them to, we know, to apply them, not just apply them, but analyze the application of those things, evaluate the results of those things to create deeper solutions, right? And that takes place over the course of a whole unit, not just, right, in one shot, right? And we know that active learning over the course of that matrix, over that taxonomy, leads to the engagement, but the engagement has to be built in from the beginning as well. We know that when we do have student engagement, everybody here has seen it at one time or another. We know that it's crucial for enhancing the learning outcomes and creating positive learning experiences. We know that it's crucial. You remember what you do. Yes, you can remember what you copy, you can remember what you memorize, but that memory is limited. You can only remember so many numbers in a bunch, right? You need to be able to retain information, not that is rote, but that will allow you to move through different problems in different situations. So it's not just about memorizing, right? It's about retaining the key information that will allow you to develop the critical thinking, which ultimately that's what leads to the academic performance or those breakthrough or those aha moments we see in the classroom, right? When you engage students in tasks that are meaningful, even if they take 3-4 days to get through, the look and the sensation that happens with students when they get it, when they have that moment, when they break through, it means that they've exercised those critical thinking wheels, they've greased those wheels, and those wheels are turning. And then they want to do more, right? Because they've had success. And so we see improved academic performance with increased engagement. So the role of engagement is never to be understated when we lesson plan, when we develop unit plans, right? So what does it look like? All the things that I just talked about. Every one of us who have been in the front of a classroom have seen the lack of encouragement, have seen the limited student input when you have to drag the answers out of students by asking repeatedly. Everybody saw Ferris Bueller's Day Off, right? Bueller, Bueller, Bueller. Now, I obviously we want students to follow instructions in the classroom, so please understand what it means. Just because students need to follow instructions, there is a place for compliance in the room, right? There are things that we do, there is a compliant aspect to learning. Again, it's not one or the other, it's using two to balance each other. Especially in some of our public schools in New York City, And certainly after meeting my colleagues in Rhode Island, talking about some of the situations there with them as well, right? Like there is compliance necessary. So it's again, it's like the AI BI balance. We need to balance. You know, compliance is a lecturing. You all know this, standardized testing. We do these things because we have goals that we need to meet. There are accountability issues. There are things that we need to do. There are targets we have to hit. But I promise you, and I hope that you know this inherently as powerful educators, is that if we get kids into authentic learning experiences, there's a transferable piece there that allows them to then see a state exam or a unit exam that is in a different, as much more easy to approach, much more easy to dissect, just another problem to solve if they spend their time solving real problems. What does active engagement look like? Yeah, you know what it looks like. Nobody raising their hands, just kids participating, collaborating. There are structures set up in the classroom so that students can work across with one another. There are accountable talk metrics. You know, there's all kinds of problem solving and inquiry-based learning happening, deeper questioning. We know that the questions that are, you know, the questions that educators ask in the classroom to advance the learning are probably the strongest lever in any of this work. What kinds of questions are you prompting students with? Just like we see with AI, right? And the better things we ask, the better off it gives us. We can set up group discussions, project-based learning. We know this stuff, but we have to get back to setting ourselves up for it. We don't build the lessons that we develop with AI just for convenience. We build it so it can create these complex structures within our classroom. So administrators, right, knowing that teachers need that freedom and that ability to leverage the classroom time to manage these types of approaches. We know the benefits: improved retention, critical thinking, more motivated, dynamic classroom environment. We all say we want to have the classroom where there's noise, where there's kids moving around, doing things. What we ask them to do is what matters the most, right? So ask yourselves. So I'm going to come back to this when we get to the discussion piece, right? What kind of, and this is the question I'm going to kick us off with when we get to there. What kind of learners do you want? Do you want the compliant, dutiful learner? And maybe sometimes you do, it's okay if you feel that way. Or do we want the engaged learner? So when we do that, I'll come back to this slide and we can suss some of these things out. But just to highlight a couple, right? We know the compliant, dutiful learner will respond to straightforward questions, but needs scaffolding, right? We know that they seek approval and want the high marks. We know they complete the work. We know that the engaged learner chooses to take the risks. You can see the boredom when the questions are not driving them in the right place. They pursue their own trains of thought in areas based on outside influence or based on research they've done on their own, right? So you can see the difference. And again, what kind of learner do you want, right? And again, the key lever, how do we get the engagement? And this is where the AI starts to meet. This is where the BI and the AI start to link up, right? This is where they start to link up. It's what we ask them to do, the task, right? The root of developing the thinker lies not in the information that we give them, but the experiences we design for them. Whether it's formative assessment, whether it's summative assessment, whatever we ask the kids to do and how we guide their execution of that, that's the foundation for getting the engaged learner. It's not about showing the video. It's not about having the busy work. It's not about keeping them compliant. It's not about just having them be talking, just doing a think, pair, share. You know, these are beginning places, but with the technology, we have a lot more possibilities going beyond going beyond the things that we know, going beyond the gallery walks, which I still love, right? But going beyond the Socratic seminar, which are great strategies and great tools for student engagement. But again, what we ask kids to do is the key lever. So let's take a look, right? So this is an 8th grade science lesson plan developed by AI, of course, for the wonderful teachers of Prestige Academy. Students will define, differentiate conduction, convection, and radiation through guided exploration and example. This is my objective. Materials I'm going to need are a heat transfer slideshow or anchor chart, metal spoon, a cup of hot water, infrared lamp, black and white paper, small fan for demonstrations, heat transfer, sorting activity, and then, to make sure that I'm understanding the impact of the lesson, doing a short quiz at the end. Okay. And so this is broken up into wonderful lesson parts that all of us probably recognize in one form or another. The first piece is the engage section, the do now, whatever you want to call it, right? We go through the do together, whatever version of it your school or your district has. We want to, in this case, it's why do things get hot? Show a metal spoon in hot water. Why does the spoon feel hot? Shine an infrared lamp on black and white paper, et cetera, et cetera. Just to sort of make them make quick predictions and understand this idea of heat transfer. Then we get into an I do as the teacher, right? Define conduction, define convection. In most cases, they'll put it in some kind of notebook, define some kind of language objective, right? Et cetera. All really great practice. I'm going to provide some real world examples. Maybe I'll show a video. I might demonstrate by using materials that I have as a teacher in the classroom. Okay. Then I'm going to do a guided practice, where we do a sorting activity, a think, pair, share, right? So we're going to do this work for 15 minutes, but I've got my kids talking. I've got my kids, collaborating. And then the independent practice, right? Where again, we'll go back to the spoon. We'll ask them to draw and explain, write a brief explanation, multiple modalities, right? And then I do my 5-question check-in, multiple choice that I'll generate with AI. Amazing, made my life so easy. Okay, this is a pretty good lesson. Not amazing, it's not tremendous, but it's pretty good, right? Well, what about thinking about it like this, right? What I'm going to ask kids, remember, I have them for a limited amount of time. So I have to start to think out of the box. So in order to engage students, what I have to start to think of is outside of these 45-minute bits of information, even though I know our kids are TikTok oriented and are looking at, 30-second bits of information, right? But at the end of the day, we need to think about designing experiences that allow kids to wade through and solve problems, right? So we might have to design lessons that take a series of lessons that get us to that place, right? And a series of lessons is designed to engage students. But again, it's what ultimately we're asking kids to do. Here, I want to investigate conduction, convection, and radiation through hands-on activities. Not much of a difference from the last lesson. In this case, I want this work to lead to the designing and testing of a solar oven. I think I've referenced the solar oven in previous webinars, but that's a great example. But here, take a look at how this series of lessons is going to go, which I can then, after I've sketched out, to use AI to dig deeper and create the daily lessons maybe for myself, which is where that efficiency component comes into play, right? But here, in lesson 1, I'm going to introduce this concept of heat transfer. I'm going to do the metal spoon component, heat the air in a balloon, do all kinds of stuff. Then I'm going to have stations where kids actually can go and touch, feel, and play with this stuff. So they're actually going to do it, kind of like going to a museum where they can actually do the experiments, right? Then that might take the whole period. That might take 2 days, actually. Who knows? The third day, maybe the second day, whatever it is the second piece of the lesson, which is where I'm going to conduct the experiment, right? Okay, which is where I'm going to have small group, which is where I'm going to have small group experiments, where I'm going to ask them to draw connections, right? Testing heat conduction through different materials, sun through glass, right? Have conversations amongst the kids, designing examples, designing charts about these kinds of things. Moving forward, again, it could take 2-3 days. Moving on to lesson 4, building and testing a solar oven, designing the plans. This is certainly going to take more than one session of 45 minutes. This is going to take probably 2 weeks. So this is really a mini unit. That's really a lesson that I now have kids building an oven. Ultimately, in the case, of course, what are they going to do to test it? They're going to make s'mores, right? They're going to melt the chocolate. Whose chocolate's going to melt the fastest? They're going to time it. They're going to have a competition. But ultimately, through this solar oven design, they're covering the same concepts that we tried to cover in that same 45-minute period. But I've made better use of my maybe week. Maybe if I only meet if in an elementary school, if I'm doing some kind of science work where I only get to see the science person, or I only have time to teach the science 1 or 2 times a week, it's taking me to, but the project itself is allowing children to be engaged in the building of something. Now, we certainly can take ourselves to the AI to design, different kinds of solar ovens, and kids can ask it to sketch it out, and they can take the AI, but they're using the AI to solve a problem, not just to be more efficient or to get the answer to write the paper for them, right? They're actually using it to test designs, to see if something will work or won't work. Maybe taking the data that they've gathered from a test run and putting that data in, saying, how can we improve the convection after they've learned, right? So they're really working with the work here, as opposed to here, where they're getting the information, they're being quizzed on it, and most likely moved on through it. So again, the student engagement component requires a different kind of planning, and it requires a different kind of observing, and it requires a different kind of managing, right? Just to keep our administrators in the loop here, right? Like, you've got to be able to see that in a science classroom. They need that space to build the engagement. Now, as educators, we deliver education. We don't always write the tasks. Sometimes we modify them. But there's got to be a way for us to determine if the tasks that we're putting in front of children, whether we create them or they come out of the packaged curricula, whether they come out of the program, whatever it may be, we need, as educators, a way to decide. We have that tool. You guys are familiar with Bloom's. You guys are familiar with probably depth of knowledge, Webb's depth of knowledge tool. If you aren't, it works alongside of Bloom's taxonomy in the same way we understand Bloom's. We ask tasks that ask kids to use certain skills at certain levels, right? Whether they just need to recall something or reproduce something, whether they need to take a skill and think through the concept and answer in conceptual terms, whether they need to use it strategically to reason through a problem or extend thinking through something they haven't seen before on new material, right? So it's really this woman, her name is Karen Hess, decided to combine the two. This is totally open education resource. It's out there on the web. It's also it's a worksheet she created a while back in like 2003, but it's been updated recently. Again, if you Google it, it's out there. But what it does is it allows you to take a task and measure its sense of rigor, because we know, again, mind you, it's a matrix. And we have to work within where our students are capable. So remember I said at the beginning of this conversation, we start at the beginning of a unit of study, right? At the lower end of the matrix, at the taxonomy, right? Where we're asking kids to remember, we're asking them to recall, right? Refresh the thinking around things. As we deepen the learning, we deepen the ask. We deepen the level of responsibility they have to deliver to us, whether they know something or not about what we're talking about, what we're teaching and learning together, right? So this matrix, and again, if you can't see it on the screen right now, because I know it's small, we will be sending it out along with the PowerPoint, so you will have access to this, but you certainly can Google this tool. But again, I know in New York City, we have curricula that we are executing, that we are learning, that we are delivering while we're learning it. It's important for us to be able to have the tools to assess what it is we're putting in front of those kids. And this is one of those things like Bloom's taxonomy that kind of over time you really sort to inherently memorize and you start to recognize, right? And you start to know, right? When a task requires multiple sources, when a task requires students to synthesize information across multiple texts and apply it to a new problem as opposed to one that they've seen over time in class, right? Moving through this matrix really helps you to understand how you're challenging and engaging students, right? And again, the more deep you go, the more complex the usage of the AI and the technology work is, right? So again, let me give you an example of the roll up the sleeves, elbow work, right? Teachers have to do and have done for years. We have a task that comes out of a curriculum, right? Here's an example, math task. Little Bear wants to make a symmetrical design using yellow, red, green, and blue pattern blocks to put on, this is for my elementary folks. I know we have some middle people, we talk about middle and high a lot, but here's some for elementary. The value of each green block is 10 cents. Each colored block's cost is proportional to the triangle's cost. Design a pattern for Little Bear's vest that is worth $4. Use at least 2 of each of the shapes you choose when you make your design. Show all your mathematical thinking. This sounds like it would have come out of Illustrative Mathematics, out of Envision Math, out of any one of these kinds of programs. It's a totally good task. There's no problem with it. But as a teacher, if I'm delivering this task from my program or from my curricula, it's important that I take that task apart and understand what it's actually asking my kids to do, so that I understand, as you can see on this worksheet that a teacher so aptly did, right? Where it says, what are the underlying mathematical concepts? Well, in this question, in this task that the curricula is asking, symmetry, properties of a hexagon, a trapezoid, a triangle, a rhombus. So there's some geometry here. What are the standards that are aligned to this, right? What are the different problem-solving strategies? I can use a model, I can use a key, a chart, a guess and check strategy. These are the possible solutions that my students may or may not come up with, so that when I see them as a teacher, I'm not surprised, right? So I can begin, and again, we're going to, as we move towards the next webinar, when we start to talk about parents, we're going to start to talk about feedback as well. But when I can anticipate solutions that kids might have, I can start to be armed with that better and deeper feedback to move them forward and away from the misconceptions that I identified when I was looking for the underlying mathematical concepts, right? So this is the work of teaching right here. This is literally the work of teaching. I'm giving my kids this problem, right? In order for the kids to solve that problem and get learning from me, I need to understand what's going on in that problem and what they're doing, what they may do, even if they don't do it. I need to know what the language that they need access to. I need all of these different things to ensure that my students are engaged in the work. If I don't have them, my students will lose interest real quick, as opposed to just checking it right or wrong. Knowing these things and planning this way or a way like this, this is the work. This is the work before we use the AI. This is the BI, the biological intelligence, right? We need to learn to use these tools to be able to go beyond enhancing in efficiency, to use it to solve the larger scale problems, so that we can set the students up to do what's going to engage them the most, even if it's just a generic math problem like this. If you're going to ask kids to invest in it, teachers need to invest in it as well. And this is the kind of investment that drives the engagement with the biological intelligence factor. Right? So it's important to recognize that there are levels to this thing. Right? First, we engage students to understand the AI, right? So we've talked about engagement. We've talked about understanding how to engage the task. We've talked about identifying how rigorous the task is, so that is it going to properly engage at the proper level of where we are in a unit or in a lesson, right? And now we start to think about how can we use the technology to really enhance this thing. But the first thing we have to do is make sure we have to engage students to understand AI, right? We have to ask students to develop prompts, generate AI. Let's see with stuff we talked about in few past webinars. Let the AI generate responses, analyze the responses, really begin to trust the tool, learn how to use the tool, learn how to prompt engineer, right? Learn how to enter the right prompts to get the right things, learn how to check those prompts for hallucinations, all of the cool stuff that we've been learning together alongside one another. But second, we have to then engage students to use the AI to support problem solving, not just to check my writing, provide me more concise version of this, generate me an image of that, insert a table into my report that looks like this. Amazing. But when we get the AI tools that are developed by educators, they'll start to ask different questions, or, and deeper questions, right, to solve problems. And that's where I can't wait for this thing to get, right? But how do we know where we are? And this is going to kind of be our second point of conversation that I'll come back to, is, and I, had a really, as I identified before, and some of you were we were at Tennessee State University, and we had the opportunity to meet Dr. Arrighi. And Dr. Arrighi created the AI C2 utilization spectrum, C2 being convenience to competence. And this message resonated with me so strongly, because if we're going to match the AI with the BI, we need to move away from the convenience of the tool to using the tool competently. And so the tool, the spectrum that Dr. Arrighi created, the assistant dean, the Office of Teacher Education at Tennessee State University, again, this is public on their website. We just had the privilege of having the opportunity to have her present this to us, which is amazing. And I certainly advise you to make that trip if you can. But we need to identify where we are on this scale, or where you or your institution is on this scale, before you can extend beyond the biological intelligence, right? Because you have to assess where your kids are, more importantly, assess where your staff is, and be honest about how you're going to move through this spectrum. What's key to that, and what I saw several schools, I mean, I can't compliment these schools enough that I see do this work, but you have to action plan your way through this spectrum, right? Move yourself from passive consumer of convenience to creative collaborator, critical evaluator, and ultimately an autonomous innovator, where you have the opportunity to leverage this tool, but you got to learn how to use it. And you have to, as a school leader, if you are a building leader, whether you're a coach leading teachers, a principal leading teachers and coaches, a superintendent leading principals, you have to identify where your competency is now and set a plan for how you're going to build the competency moving forward. Because if you don't, you will be left behind. And this tool is right in our wheelhouse as educators, right? It's a spectrum, it's a scale, it advances, right? I mean, it's everything we want as educators. It has convenience, exploration, analysis, application, mastery. So again, I want you to think about, and I'll come back to it for our second point of conversation, where are you on this scale? But it all boils down to something everybody on this call knows full well. Critical thinking. If we're going to talk about AI, we obviously have to talk about the BI. But most importantly, we have to teach critical thinking skills. We have to put students in situations where they can apply critical thinking. We have to divide them into groups where they can use critical thinking with one another and test theories across those groups collaboratively. We know all this. But we know that we have to do it with AI, because they have the tool. We have to meet them where they are in the classroom, which is why we've talked about bringing our staff up to speed, which is why a lot of you are here, which is why many of you went to Tennessee State University or will go. But we need to remember, I like this cartoon. I'll give you a second to read it. It makes me laugh every time. If you can't see it, I'll read it to you. It's a young man sitting on the bench with a dog with glasses, and he says, "I teach my kids that these things are right and these things are wrong, period, end of story." And then the dog says to the young man, "But wouldn't that teach them to believe anything they're told without applying any critical thinking?" And then the young man says, "I don't think about that." And the dog said, "Duh." Right? And so we need to get away from that. We need to really use the tools we have to help us. The machine's not going to critically think for us. We need to use critical thinking to use the machine to help us solve the problems ahead of us, right? And so critical thinking is simple. It's defined by Daniel J. Willingham and How to Teach Critical Thinking back in 2019. Google it if you want the text. It's somewhere in my notes. It'll be in the notes when you get the PowerPoint. Critical thinking with AI it's novel. It's not a direct repetition of something you've learned before.
Hey, David, don't Google it, AI it.
Or AI it, thank you. Self-directed. It's not just repeating the steps you've been given, which was one of the key identifiers, right, of an engaged, active learner. And effective, following patterns that are likely to yield useful conclusions. We might not always get that one right. That's part of the process, right? So this is the biological intelligence that you all know. Maybe we've looked at it in a different way or thought about it in context differently today. There's nothing here that y'all as educators didn't know already. But without this biological intelligence, and I thank you again, Dr. Melton, for sharing this terminology and this phrase, because it's so powerful. Without this biological intelligence, the artificial intelligence doesn't really help us beyond what we're seeing in the marketplace now. And again, all of those things are wonderful. This is not taking anything away, but we need to move the potential of this tool forward in our classrooms. And we need to think beyond just making this and making that, but helping us solve this and solve that, right? And so we know some of this is going to be review, but we know that we personalize learning. We meet diverse learner needs with AI. We just went through it, we enhanced student engagement, hands-on learning, controlled experimentation, promotes exploration through virtual labs, the VR, the gaming, right? Gamifying, all of these things that we've been talking about and experimenting with. We know that with all of this, feedback still most important lever of them all. It can be timely, concise, repeated. It helps us understand strengths, look for areas of improvement. Engagement in learning. If I'm not being repetitive, I hope I am. What are some of the applications, right? We talked about gamification, dynamic learning environments, not just Google Classroom, but those virtual reality spaces. We saw some of these spaces at Tennessee State University. We saw the teamwork that we required as adult learners to do this together.
And David, I just want to add, Google has Gemini, and I know there's a big conference coming up in San Diego. But again, what we learned at Tennessee State was more hands-on than the platform that Gemini is presenting. They have the old worksheets. We saw them in actually at the BETS conference in London, and it's the same old thing, So what we're asking our people to do is a lot of heavy lifting for them to understand all the different tools in AI, not only Gemini, but everything else that's out there. And we found a Poe, we found Magic School, we found Monica. So these are the type of things that I want you guys to be exposed to. Don't go with Google as the main company. Google is one of many that we need to continue to seek out and learn from, the startup companies are sometimes more innovative than these all established companies. I just want to throw it out there because I know there's a contingency from the New York City Department of Education that's going to be going to San Diego for the conference. Again, let's keep our minds open, but the work that I saw at Tennessee State University is beyond what I believe is happening around the with these major companies.
And just, I'm going to add one final note to that too. And just remember that Dr. Mountain and her team said, if you do come across a startup AI platform or tool or resource or something, and you're not 100% sure, just send it to us and we'll send it to the team. Like they're willing to look at it, explore, and give feedback. So always keep that back in your mind as we see new tools coming up.
Yeah, yes, very, very important, right? Just like AI hallucinates, some of these products work in different ways. They have charges, they have this, they have that. We need to break down some of the walls. But at the end of the day, again, you can't have the AI without the BI. We need the, we use it to enhance. But I think, Sal, you talked about the conference, and I'm sure it's going to be amazing. And they're really connecting the marketplace to the education place. And I think that's important. But I think more importantly, like we're still going to have to teach kids skills and using skills. And so using the technology in a more deep way than, if I'm selling a technology product, an AI product, I want to sell its strengths, the personalized tutoring, the instant feedback, all these cool things, right? But at the end of the day, what it is that I really want to be selling is a tool that my people will be using to solve problems, not just solve my problems as in solving the problem, right? The engineering problem, the science problem, the math problem, the literacy, right? The literacy piece. Decoding meaning in a text or thing, it's really great for that stuff, but how can I use it to decode the Rosetta Stone like the people recently did, right? Not the Rosetta Stone, but they unlocked some scrolls, right? And they like, how can I use the tool beyond just, as Sal said, the worksheet, beyond just though it'll do this for me piece. It's what this will do for me will lead me as the BI to this, which will then allow me to use the AI for that, and so on, and creating that chain of interactive work, right? So I think that's a really important point. So thank you for that. We know there's voice recognition. We know there's response. I just want a little PSA. When you get the spam calls, when you think it's spam, don't speak. They might record your voice. Hello, no, I want, no, thank you. Just if you think it's spam, I just don't answer anymore. I let them leave a voicemail because they can clone your voice now with all these tools. So it's important for us to have, the IQ around these kinds of tools, right? And so we know we have Poe, we have Gemini, Magic School, Monica, Notebook, LM, which is also through Google, Hume, TeachFX, Suno, all of these different tools that we can explore, we can use. These things are meant to complement our biological intelligence and take that student engagement to a whole other level. The prompting is key. We know that. What we ask these tools to do is just like what teachers ask kids to do, what we ask the AI to do, super important. So in conclusion, really understanding the difference in types of engagement, what the role of these technology tools are, and what the benefits are overarchingly beyond the simplistic ones is what today was all about, right? So now what I want to do is open it up to conversation around two different things, right? One, what kind of learners do you want, people? Feel free to just shout out. You don't need to raise your hand or anything, or you can put a comment in if you want. I can't see the comments, so hopefully someone will read them. But
Engaged learners.
What does that look like to you?
Students having a good time learning and seeing what AI can do, not what it can't do, not what it's described to be harmful. Students want to get hands-on, and so engaging them looks like a whole class being excited about learning.
I agree. I agree. And the way that we ask kids to engage is what is most important, right? Whether we use AI or not, right? What are we asking them to do?
Well, it all starts with the educator. Educators got to be okay with not knowing how to use it, but AI is so easy to use that the more you use it, the more comfortable, like riding a bike. So educators have been doing this for centuries. It's going to get easier for the educators with PD training like this. You have to break down and demystify it.
Correct. You got to build the foundation. That's why it's super important to use the Arrighi scale, right? To understand where we are. So we can be honest and identify and where we need to shore up, where we need to use that valuable professional learning time. Really good point.
Yes, when we first went to Tennessee, that I used for the first time, 'cause I never used before AI. And I said that people my generation, 50 plus, made me feel comfortable about using it. Made me feel okay about using it, not feeling like I was stealing anything or like I was cheating or like I was doing something wrong. I know that my students use it. My eighth graders use it all the time when I assign them a science project. And my okay, kind of like okay statement to now was, okay, I do labs, I do dissection, I do this, I do that, I do what calories, I will do showcases, we present, we do this. But this is like so much more work, so much more into like it's going to Tennessee show me that I can request this from my student in being okay, and that they actually going to learn more as I am learning, because I just started learning this. So to me, this is still like the beginning steps. Like I'm crawling. I just started crawling, but I'm trying to crawl a little bit more each day to make it to walk, and hopefully by next year I can keep my steps together with my students.
That's wonderful. That is really amazing.
Yes, and thank you for
Good.
sharing.
It's good to be fearless.
So the comment was the key to using AI in the classroom is to have DOE superintendents and principals adopting the AI technology for classroom as a universal tool.
Yes. So if you're, it's interesting. That's a great point. Because if you're, let's say you're in a building where this culture isn't widespread, like we've had the opportunity to work with some schools where the culture is there's a core group and they're spreading the message. But if you're like a loner in a school working with this stuff, you need to sit down with your assistant principal, or you need to sit down with your principal, depending on their working relationship, and be like, listen, I'm trying this tool. Here's what I may see. Maybe you can come in and observe me off the schedule, just to see how this tool works and see what your interest is in pursuing some of this learning, and you can support me in sending me to professional learning, right? And sort of build that relationship, that cultural relationship around trying and risking things with the administrator, I think is really important. I'm glad you brought that up, because it is important to have that support from the top, right? So that when they're, and I know, Sal, I know anytime you do professional development or we do professional development, there's the, the teacher piece and there's the principal piece, right? Or the assistant principal component, which is, how do I push in and provide feedback to make this stuff even better?
Any other comments or questions or anything, just even since being back, for those that went to Tennessee anything you'd like to share? Any other questions that you may have? And for anyone who was,
Kelly,
go ahead, Carlos.
going back to engagement, this is something that we as principals or teacher educators, we have to make sure that our students go back home and speak to their parents about this and how happy, how much they are learning, share the same learning with their classmates and with their friends. The same way I have done since I came on Wednesday night. And I have been calling friends and telling them, listen, I went to this conference about AI and this is what happened. So I think that beyond having engagement in the classroom, we have to engage ourselves outside of the classroom so that we all can learn.
I agree. Washington, you want to go ahead and
Yes, good evening, everyone. It's been a great presentation. Thank you, David, for putting all of this together. It's a nice recap of what we learned in Tennessee. But I go back to something that us in New York City public schools that we have these security blocks on the school devices, and most, if not all, of the really, really good models that were presented at Tennessee State University are blocked. My teachers who I took with me, Ms. Montalvo and Mr. Bermarco, we're going to put together a presentation for our staff, right? And I had to ask for one of these models to be unblocked so we can do this presentation, because a lot of our teachers already use Magic School, but I don't want to be on that surface level with Magic School. I want to go deeper, like with Monica, with Gemini, with Suno, with all the other ones, to really, really show teachers the impact that artificial intelligence can have in making their job more efficient, and also to engage your students. Until we get the DOE to unblock these really, really great models that are out there, it's going to be hard to get that buy-in, because right now, the best presentation that I can give is probably how to maximize your Magic School, right, from my library or my auditorium, at school, unless if I go off of the network and go on my personal device, and who knows if the data is going to work and all that stuff. So, we really need to get some kind of a push to a higher level. I don't know who on this call will be able to get that to a deputy chancellor or even to the chancellor, just so they can understand that for teachers to really maximize student engagement with AI, they're gonna have to just accept that it's here and maybe decide on one or two models, like a Monica or or Gemini. But we're not gonna be able to do it unless at a full scale New York City public schools says, you know what, turn the switch on. You guys are full steam ahead. So I know that may sound like a rant maybe, but we have to get past it.
Yeah, I remember Washington when YouTube came out, and we couldn't get. But YouTube had amazing things, and we couldn't get to YouTube, and we had to call to get the thing unblocked. And so I have a hunch we will get there, as New York City always does. But yes, your message will be relayed.
And I also, Washington, I think after the conversation, the chancellor is going to be at the ASU San Diego conference. And I think after there, I think she will be coming back and her team with a different perspective about this. So everything is work in progress, but at least you guys could be the spoke people right now to push it, as well as the next webinar is going to be on how do we engage parents in this work? And I think it's going to answer some of Carlos's questions about that, about going out, or concerns about going out there into the community, show them what to do. But let's see what happens. She'll be back on, I believe, April 7th from the conference, and let's see what they come up with,
Yeah. I'll certainly get some people to push the issue.
Yeah, and I think, and we have some folks too that I know that we'll be there as well, so we're hoping to be able to engage in some additional conversations as well. And I know I saw the comment too from other locations. It's, everybody's kind of in the same boat, you get these tools and then you get blocked. So I think that's really, something that we do have to take serious.
I think Sam has a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to what Washington was saying. I think what it's going to take to make it like using AI comfortable in the classroom, is particularly on the student side. I think it's going to be easier for teachers to adopt it because, at least on those, stage 1, stage 2, maybe even stage 3 areas of the spectrum, simplifying their work life. But I think I was speaking to a guy over the weekend who he's in his 60s, went back to school, like divinity school. And he's talking about their AI policies, and it's basically just like you use it, you're out. And I'm sure that's what most people are experiencing, something closer to that than to yes, we welcome AI use. And so I think it's going to start with like changing. I mean, we talked a bit about this a bit at the conference, but changing what we grade. So less of write me a 5-page paper because AI can do that, but using AI to, we're going to talk about this thing, vetting sources, right? Like you have AI write this paper and then you prove that the sources are actually correct, or you show your modifications, whatever it's got to be. I think this group is the kind of group that can start to develop those lessons that will teach kids good use of AI, proving our point, and then bringing that and spreading it further to, people like the commissioner and things like that, to make it more acceptable everywhere.
You have a really good idea that we can create our own internal prompt library to make this work, more powerful.
I like that. Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Kelly, I can say something just for context about Canada's largest school board, Toronto District School Board. Confidentially, in the last week, it's actually solidified agreement with Google on the Gemini front. Google being one of the top cloud providers that we work in for education technology, Gemini student control seems to be what's winning the day. So I think when boards are looking at adoption, it's at many levels. Security, first and foremost, blocking the apps that we know is only one front, but there's so many apps that we don't know that students do know. So students are using 9 to 15 different AI tools, GPT tools already that aren't blocked. Most teachers that we talk to are okay with the utilization of AI as long as they can defend what they're doing. Finally, if you look at the student controls that would be at like New York Department of Education or Toronto, 4th largest school board in North America versus the #1, their issues are still the same. Security, use, diversity, PD, those student controls, I think, are much more specific, and they're in the lane of how do we can control the learning experience. Further context, Toronto District School Boards in a small pilot are actually taking librarians per high school, and they are hosting 2 a week PD sessions after school for 30 minutes. And it's a just jump in and join if you're a teacher. And we're running a virtual co-op at that school with students using OpenAI specifically and the deep research component of OpenAI. And they're joining those meetings with the educators to listen to what they're saying and actually feeding it back in to get outcomes. So personally, I believe the DOE will move towards this 100%. All districts will. It's just a matter of student control. But I think everyone on this call should be very optimistic. Teachers will rise to this challenge with PD. There's no shortcut, but every teacher is going to regard this as 2 types. You're either fascinated with what's in your remote control and you ask questions of how does it work and how many pixels and this and that, or you're going to be power, volume, channel, guide, mute. 95% of the teachers out there right now are going to be on that side. So I think these sessions are very, very important, but school districts are being led by the monsters, Microsoft and Google. They will be the ones that have the keys to the kingdom for AI use, but it'll be about student control. So I'm encouraged with what I heard. Thank you for, this sharing. David, you did an excellent job.
Well, that's very kind of you, Kyle. I appreciate it. I agree with you that I think we are in a great spot. I think
We are.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think big things are coming.
It's
Well,
around
I
the
wanna
corner.
be
We
cognizant
know that.
time as well. So thank you, Kyle, for sharing that, because I think, the people we have on this call, you are leaders, you are innovators. David, thank you so much. It's great to kind of recap and make sure we keep our mind moving forward on this and not to get caught back up into that bureaucracy trap that is so easy to. So we are going to be scheduling our next webinar, and the next one's going to focus on having that conversation with parents. So stay tuned for more information on that. We know there's a lot going on, so we'll be getting that date set up. And in the meantime, if there's any questions, please let me know. Marcus and I are working on the collaborative tool, the credits from TSU as well. We have the certificates, they'll be coming. And then also, again, Mr. Vasquez was so kind to take photos during that time. So we'll be linking all of that together as well. So again, if there's any questions, don't hesitate to reach out and just let me know. So thank you, everyone. And thank you, David.
You're always welcome. It's a pleasure to see everybody, and I wish you all a wonderful week.
Enjoy.
Thank you. Well done.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you,
Thank you.
David.
Bye.
Everybody. Thank you, Kelly. Bye, everyone.
Yep.